If you're a nanny, you've probably heard someone say to you, you should write that off when you buy something for work, such as gas, toys, supplies, or training. But here's the truth. Most nannies are not allowed to write off work expenses, and doing this wrong can create serious tax problems. In this video, I'm explaining exactly when you can deduct expenses, when you absolutely cannot, and of course, why does this really exist? This video isn't about loopholes. It's about staying protected and filing your taxes correctly. There is one key reason this topic is so confusing, and that's because nannies are employees, not independent contractors. Most nannies are paid as W-2 household employees, and that one classification matters because employees and independent contractors are taxed very differently. You'll find that a lot of online tax advice assume that you're self-employed. And let's be clear, nannies are not. And when you follow advice that isn't written for employees, that's when the real problem starts. If you're a W-2 nanny, the IRS treats you like any other employee, even though you work in a private home. If you're a W-2 employee, you cannot deduct work expenses that your employer didn't reimburse. That means things like mileage, work supplies, training, uniforms, or meals are not write-offs anymore. A few years ago, the IRS changed the rules. Employees can no longer deduct work expenses, and that rule is still in place today. So, if you're a W-2 nanny, buying toys, gas, or supplies out of your own pocket does not mean that you can deduct them on your taxes. Now, why does this rule exist? This isn't about punishing nannies, it's about responsibility. The IRS is expecting your employer to cover work-related costs. When an employee pays for business expenses out of their own pockets, the proper solution is reimbursement, not a tax deduction. In other words, your nanny family should reimburse you for your work expenses, not expect you to absorb the cost or write it off on your taxes later on. Now, what counts as a work expense for nannies? Work expenses for nannies include things like mileage that is driven during work hours, activity fees, supplies used for the children, and of course, work-required training or certifications. These are legitimate work costs, but that does not mean that they are your tax responsibilities. If you are paying for these expenses and not being reimbursed, that is not a tax strategy. That's a compensation issue. And compensation issues need and should be handled in your work agreement, not in your tax return. Now, when a nanny can deduct expenses, there are limited situations where a nanny may be able to deduct expenses, but only if they have legitimate self-employment income. For example, you run your own babysitting business, you do consulting, you teach classes, or you have income that is separate from your nanny job. Expenses related to that income may be deductible, but W-2 nanny's income and self-employment income must be kept separately. Mixing the two is a common and costly mistake. Here are common mistakes I see that nannies make. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that a nanny is told to just write it off without them understanding their tax status. Another mistake is the family encouraging the nanny to pay for the supplies instead of reimbursing them. And finally, some nannies file as independent contractors just to claim deductions, which often lead to higher taxes, loss of protection, and of course, major IRS issues later on. Saving money on taxes should never come at the cost of your legal protection. The correct way to handle work expenses as a nanny is through reimbursement. Mileage should be reimbursed at an agreed upon rate. Supplies, activities, it should be paid by the family or immediately reimbursed. Training requirements should be discussed and documented. This keeps your pay accurate, your taxes clean, and of course, your employment relationship professional. If you're a W-2 nanny, writing off work expenses is usually not allowed, and this is not necessary. You deserve to be reimbursed, not reimbursing your employer. Understanding this distinction protects you, protects your income, and keeps your taxes clean.